Happy Saturday. I am Nathan,
I'm Samantha.
and we are the Farlows. We weren't sure what we were going to talk about, so we were throwing out some ideas, and we thought we may talk about testimonies.
Yeah.
Maybe not our personal testimony yet, but just the importance of being willing to share your testimony.
Or maybe some of our testimony.
Yeah.
See where the Lord leads in the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We are off to get some metal things because I have Nathan being my handyman at church, and we have a cabinet that we don't want to tip over. So
we're fastening it into the wall, and we need some, whatever they're called, things you put in the wall to put the screws into.
I call them anti-tip hooks, but I don't know what they're actually called.
It's official.
That's what I typed into Amazon and it came up. So pretty much anything will come.
Very good.
If you wonder where our kids are,
We're at Grandma's.
they're at Grandma's. This has been such a blessing. Grandma has been asking for our kiddos on Saturday. So we are just taking full advantage because most likely in weeks to come our kiddos will probably be back there, maybe chatting a little bit. So we're just enjoying some date days because parents, you know, this comes in seasons. It's not always like this.
Yep.
But right now she's been requesting grandchild time on Saturdays, and we've decided to share them. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to want to share our kids, honestly.
Yep.
I just love spending so much time with them.
That's only for a few hours, and so we've been dropping them off. Like today was almost lunchtime, or actually after lunchtime. So for a few hours here, and yeah, it's been good. Been fruitful.
We're able to watch some Christian apologetics.
Yep.
Eat some popcorn that we wouldn't have let our kids eat.
It's kind of our watching the apologetics is our newfound favorite thing to do together, which is really nice, educational and entertaining.
It's probably better than my normal 48 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I do love some crime detective shows. I don't really know where that puts me at in the sanctification process, but I don't know. I just really love that. Although the more I share that with people, though, I do feel like it is a common theme. Are you one that loves? Drop a comment below if you love criminal shows, but you also love Jesus. Because that is me. I don't love those scary shows and stuff, you know. But 48 hours and
Jesus is the ultimate story, so
yeah,
I mean, it kind of makes sense.
it does, I guess.
It was a bit of a mystery
Yeah.
to some.
And there were lots of crimes that happened, and we study the gospel to find them out. So it really is just a mystery story that we're living. Oh, I love that, babe.
Yeah.
Love that. What is that you always say about a mystery? Oh, I'm drawing a blank right now. When we're talking about things about the Lord when
Yes.
we're in our walk that we're just we can't quite nail down
Yeah.
the answer to.
Yeah. I mean, marriage is a bit of a mystery.
Yeah, and the Trinity.
The Trinity is a bit of a mystery. There's, lots of things in the Bible that we'll never fully be able to comprehend.
It's all right now it's hitting me. Right now. Why I love mystery so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I really don't know that was why, but I'm going to roll with that. We're just going to roll with it.
Yeah.
Because I like that much better than just somehow, I just...
The ultimate solved mystery.
It is solved, though, you said.
Yeah.
It is solved, and there's so many artifacts and so much historical documentation of the gospel and Jesus Christ and all of that ages back. So it really isn't much of a mystery anymore.
And just the shows. I mean, you're looking for eyewitnesses, which there is over 500 of the resurrection, and then like you say, evidence, archaeological evidence, all these things, kind of solving that.
I know. This is just like I said. This is kind of blowing my mind right
mystery
now.
that really matters.
It's hilarious. These are the things we talk about on our drives, and it's all making sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that watching the apologetics led into the pastor sharing his testimony, and just kind of what is what led us to the conversation about how important testimonies are.
Yes. Yeah, we actually dropped off our kiddos with my mom, and my niece had her very first job today, which was so cute, at this little drink shop. And so we went to go support her at her first day of her job, and we started chatting with people, and we had ran into a woman that her daughter I had ran into at women's conference last year. And I was asking about her daughter and just how she was doing, and she had shared that she actually had relapsed. She's addicted to drugs, and she's lost her kids, and we were just talking about that. And then that just kind of boiled into just us talking about just what God can do through our testimonies, because we believe that God is sovereign and loving, kind, and has a plan and a purpose for every single one of us. So we were just diving into a conversation earlier, just talking about what could the Lord have planned within her trials to use for His glory and for his good purpose.
Which is funny how this whole theme of this video is all kind of working together. So back to the mystery thing, another thing that's a bit of a mystery. We know the Bible's clear that everything good and bad, wicked and righteous, all things happen for God's glory. But it's a bit of a mystery sometimes, like in this world, in the time that we spend on earth, we may never know how God is glorified in some terrible event. And knowing that He's glorified in all things doesn't necessarily take the pain away, but it gives us peace knowing that everything's going to work together for His glory, according to His will. But sometimes it's a bit of a mystery of not knowing.
Yes.
Until our glorification, until we're in heaven, we may never know why this particular bad thing happened, but God does know, and we rest in that, and we stand firm on that foundation.
And in Psalm 46, we just studied that in our Bible study this last week, verse 1 through 11, which in there, a very popular Bible scripture is in 10, where it says, "Be still and know that I am God." And I just really felt like this kind of played into a lot of our conversation earlier today, because we were just talking about that peace that does only come from God, and just the tough questions sometimes that our kids ask. And Nathan and I, as we continue to share, again, just speaking of testimonies, we have just had a lot of life events that have happened. Kind of a quick synopsis of that are basically just medical things. So I've had a mass on my temple, our delivery with my son.
I mean, and even to backtrack, I mean, again, trying to do it quickly for the sake of time, it really, early on in our relationship and our marriage, it started with losing our first child.
Yes,
that would have been our first kind of foundational, like, what could this mean?
Loss.
Like, why would God allow this to happen? That was kind of our initial trying to dive deep into the Word, and really what was the foundation to having authentic faith, because we didn't know why something like that happened. And
also what we were just talking about, like, just with that, so we had talked about how, Nathan and I got married in 2015, and we actually were baptized in 2015, just shortly before we got married. And we were just talking about the sanctification process, and how sometimes we think that when people enter the waters of baptism, we can want to just expect them to be completely life changed, and just how that's not everyone's testimony. And then like he's saying, with the loss of our first child, that really just dove us into like God's sovereignty and why this happened. And even though you don't have to have a reason for why it happens, I don't think that that's every single person's story.
Well, we know, and with like kind of going back, like we know why it glorifies God in some way, and we can see now, looking back in hindsight, how it did. But also just, we don't wish that upon people, like it's also, we're kind of getting all over the place here, but it's often shared with our kids. We want our kids to have a boring testimony, we don't want them to have to lose children and have a traumatic life experience, we want their life to be easy, but sometimes, right? I shouldn't say easy, but to not have to have those tragedies and trauma, and but God uses these hard times oftentimes to bring people close to Him.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have had. Looking back now, we can see where our faith really took a turn through those hard times. So yes. So like she was saying, our testimony that God's given us is a lot of medical.
Mm-hmm.
Medical valleys per se.
Yes.
So losing our child, and then if you want to go on from there, what you were saying.
Yeah, so we just really dove into the Word when that happened, because we were pretty still new to our faith. I shouldn't say new to our faith. Nathan's went to church his whole life. I had still just only been to church for a couple of years, but I just truly don't feel like we really dove into like an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ until that loss. And we really dove in just trying to figure out the character of God. I think we were learning the character of God, which made a lot of other things make sense.
Because two things that we always really need to hold on to as believers is never questioning God's character and His sovereignty. Those two things, going through all ups and downs of life, is really what provides the foundation, the solid foundation for getting through these storms. Because the Bible is clear that we will still go through storms as Christians, but it's different because we're on a solid foundation. We're on the rock. We're not on sand. So.
And we have that peace from Psalm 46. We have that peace. We know that He is going to be with us. We know that He's going to be there in the times of our troubles. So we can have that peace and that comfort where if you don't know the Lord, and like even us, like we were still very new to personally knowing the Lord.
You're not seeking Him.
Yeah, I would say our peace was a lot less than what we have now, But then again, we could see where like through every valley and every mountaintop that the Lord has just continued to sanctify us. So kind of rolling back to what we were saying earlier about just like the sanctification and just how that happens in different orders for different people, that I think that sometimes it can be hard for us to just remember that God does have a plan. He does have a purpose. So we obviously don't feel like we have that conversation with that woman today for no reason. We obviously are going to be praying for that woman that I saw at the women's conference, and we will continue to just keep her in our prayers and just pray that God can use her in the midst of her tragedy. I actually have a woman that I've spent some time with the last couple of years, and I've seen where God can use people in the darkest of places and just be such a light for other people. And that's something that I feel like over the course of the last several years has been just encouraging, is to just see people that are just truly struggling or just are walking through valleys, but also just are that light that God calls us to be, that's up on a hill that just cannot be covered up.
Yep.
So I think it's just cool. So
before I interrupted, she was kind of going through a quick synopsis of just kind of similar to like we were talking about testimony, like Pastor sharing his testimony through valleys and peaks and valleys and whatnot, and how those times is what brought him close to God and to having a genuine, authentic faith, was going through those hard times. So she was sharing a synopsis of us. So our story is started out like the big bullet points is losing a baby. She had a couple years later, she discovered a mass on her temple. So that we can dive deeper into that in a future time. But that initially looked malignant is what the doctor was saying. So that was another time that we really grew spiritually. Miraculous event there, and then we were blessed with our daughter, which was a miracle in itself, you could say. And then, am I missing any at this point? And then COVID hit. That was a pretty season for our faith, and where we grew a lot closer to God. And then since then, I mean, it's been some thorns in the side, you could say, medically, but nothing major. But those few
And then our
major.
son was born.
Yeah, then our son was born.
And then our son was born just a couple
Which
years.
was the same timeline as the COVID experience. So all those few major events has really transformed not only the way we see God, but the peace that we have. That the amount of, what would you say, truth that we've seen in the Bible, and we've experienced firsthand, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I think that these things don't have to happen, and we can try to put things on our timeline, and but just some things are completely undeniable. So that very last point that Nathan made, even about our own testimony, I had COVID pneumonia, and I ended up delivering our son like via C-section, and it's a long story, and again, like he said, maybe something for a different day. But one of the things that just stands out to me that I just feel like is just undeniably God is that I actually woke up on Nathan's birthday. So the timeline was I delivered our son on July 22nd, and then Nathan's birthday is July 30th, and I woke up on his birthday.
Yeah.
And so like,
and they originally thought that it would be 6 weeks, anyways, that's kind of a deeper story.
It is. But
yeah.
Just all that being said, though, like, God is just so sovereign. Like, he just knows these things. And I think sometimes we can almost mistake some of these things for like coincidence or whatever the case may be. But going back to, we ended up watching those Christian apologetics like we were sharing earlier. And it's so funny how so many things are woven, and they're like, some people call them Godcidences, some people call them God winks. There's lots of different things you can call them, but like, we just really love making sure that we seek our blessings and the things that God is doing in our life, because I think just like everything, we could focus on all the negative and you're going to find the negative. But if you focus on the things that God is trying to bless you with, you will find an insurmountable amount of blessings that the Lord has given us. And so there again, like, we could chalk that event up to, oh, that was just a coincidence that I happened to wake up on his birthday. But like, we can only, like, it's just but God. God had a plan, he had a purpose, and he just does things in a way. So this pastor that we were listening to, when we were listening to some of these apologetics, were sharing that like his story was basically like he was not a Christian, then he had a family.
He was heavily influenced by drugs and went through the addiction, and God brought him out of that addiction radically. He's radically changed out of that addiction, and now he is just spreading the gospel to the entire world. I mean, literally the entire world.
But just like we said with the sanctification, he shared that even though there was one event that just radically like changed his heart toward God, and he saw that God's character and that he truly is sovereign, that moment did not make him change. It was the process that the Lord had to take him through that led him to what he's saying now. He just evangelizes and is just truly making gospel impact across the world. But
God's used him in a mighty way since that time. But
through his testimony.
But it wasn't from the day that he made Jesus his Lord and Savior. It wasn't from the moment that he believed and understood that, okay, the Word of God is the truth. I believe this. He still went through some ups and downs before he truly was able to turn away and hate his sin, and to really truly, authentically, genuinely make Jesus the Lord of his life. And of course he can, the making part is all from God. That's all a gift from God. We are saved by grace through faith, which faith is a gift. So like, it's all because God's sovereign. That was, the exact time God wanted him to step into all that. So it's ultimately up to God, but it's just a good testament of things aren't just sunshine and rainbows. The moment that you're like, okay, I want to be a realizing too that, like, with our testimony, similar to him, he would have wished that he could have had an easier road. But we also have to understand that with God's sovereignty, sometimes God does say no. You know, like we prayed for our baby to survive, and she didn't. You know, we prayed for Samantha to be healed from COVID, and she was. So ultimately, it's up to God. So we have to understand too that sometimes He's going to say no, sometimes He'll say yes, sometimes He'll say later. That's a common quote people will share. But we just have to trust, have faith, and be still and know that He's God. He's all sovereign, and He's in control.
And I think Nathan has heard it said before too that God always shows up. He always shows up, but it's just not always on our timeline. So if we just take the timeline that we have placed out of the situation and just leave it on God's timeline, He's always showing up, whether it be on this side of heaven or the other side of heaven.
Perfect example is healing.
Yes.
You know, we can pray for someone to be healed from cancer, and we can have full faith that God is going to heal them of cancer. It may not be on this side of heaven. On the earth, they may not be healed, but they're going to be healed in heaven. So regardless, His promises will be true. You know, and we can have faith in that.
Yeah.
But we just, you know, that isn't. We're still going to pray that, like with Samantha, I was still praying that she would be healed on this side of heaven, but I have to rest on the solid foundation of knowing that she will. Yeah, I can have peace knowing she will be healed. I'm just hoping it's on, you know, this side of heaven.
But that's our timeline. And again, like I said, Nathan had heard that before, but if we take our timeline out of it, there's actually never a question as to whether God is going to deliver on a timeline. It's just not our timeline, which we can constantly, Nathan and I are just as guilty.
We still fall short of that.
Absolutely. Always putting it on our timeline. And I don't know, but I just find it encouraging too. And I just was thinking about as far as like testimonies, and you know, so if you're currently walking through something that is just extremely difficult and you're not sure if you're going to make it to the other side, I think it's encouraging knowing that God can use you no matter whether you're in the midst of your trials or whether you're on the mountaintops. Now, to be honest, I feel like out of the people that we do talk to, oftentimes I feel like it's in the valley where God uses you the absolute most. But again, that's not everyone's story. But I will say that even if you're in the midst of a valley, God can use you, and your valley is going to be purposed for God's good, God's good glory, for His good purpose. And nothing is what's the word I'm looking for?
Nothing's wasted. Nothing's at the wayside, and it's essentially like God, like Jesus died on the cross too. He's not going to waste His blood. You know, like everything's for a purpose. Like she keeps saying, plan a purpose. You know, and ultimately, our phone's about to die, so we probably better wrap it up. But ultimately, even when it comes to healing and all these things that we're praying for, none of that matters if we don't have a genuine faith in God, and if we are not saved. You can have a perfect, strongest body ever and live to 120 years old here on earth, but if you don't have Christ, you have nothing. You know, if you gain the whole world but lose your soul, then it's an ultimate loss. So we want to pray for healing and all these things for other people, but the ultimate thing is to see them have Christ.
Yes. So before we get off here then today, I just want to share with you that if you have questions about your walk with Jesus, or if you're going through struggles or whatever the case may be, drop some comments below and let us do life with you. There's nothing that's more beautiful than just being in community with other believers. Nathan and I say that every single week doing men and women's group, that sometimes I feel like we can be feeling like we're going through life so isolated, and then all of a sudden we find this community of other fellow Christians, brothers and sisters in Christ, and all of a sudden the world gets a lot less small, and it just becomes, not a lot less small, a lot less big and a lot more small, because then you realize that you are in the presence of the Lord, and you're in the presence of other brothers and sisters that are navigating trials, they're navigating hard things, they're navigating joys and all the things in life alongside. So please feel free to drop some comments. Feel free to share your struggles, share your triumphs. We would love to rejoice with you, and we would love to mourn with you. And if you guys ever have anything that you want us to chit chat about while we're on our cruises, we would love to just truly just cater to some of the things that maybe the Lord is putting on your heart that you would love to hear from us. But we're just so grateful that the Lord's asking us to step into these little videos, whatever that looks like. And we just pray that this would truly just impact even just one person that's watching this. And if you don't have an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ, oh gosh, I'm getting emotional, sorry. We just pray for you before this video, after this video, that you could come to know him, and that would just make all that we do worthwhile.
Yep. Because it's the ultimate reason
it is the ultimate reason
we're doing this. And like with the testimony, perfect wrap up with the testimony that we listened to earlier. This particular pastor, he just happened to be flipping through TV and heard a sermon from Billy Graham, and that's ultimately what changed the trajectory of his life. Now, obviously, ultimately, it is God leading him to that, but it took him hearing that message that God was sharing through Billy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah.
Even if we can just have an impact on one person, this was all worth it.
Yep.
So,
Yep. So we love you guys, and we'll see you next week.